Hello, my name is Tyler Huzosky, and I'm from the Mu chapter of Phi Beta Mu. I'm from Northeast Ohio near Youngstown. I teach at Lakeview Middle School and high school there. It is my pleasure today to have Mr. Timothy Loest as our guest composer interview today. So welcome, Tim. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So really looking forward to having you and hearing about your composing process and all the great things that you do. Little background, when did you get started in band and what instrument did you play for those of us that may not know that?
I started in the fourth grade.
Oh, wow.
The school district where I grew up had two band directors, and they came to the fourth grade classroom and distributed an assessment titled a music adaptability test. And it was basically a drop the needle test. We had to listen to certain um, rhythms or pitches and then use a form that we were given to answer. And it was determined that the cornet would be a good fit for me.
Hmm. That's fantastic. Would not have thought, I guess you played cornet.
Yeah, isn't that something? So I'm
I would have thought
probably,
woodwind for some reason. I don't know why, but
well, I'm probably a generation older than a lot of the younger teachers who are teaching. And back in the 70s, most kids in my area where I grew up started on cornet and then they migrated over to trumpet.
it's cool. Are there any pieces of music from your middle school or junior high school days that inspired you to write, especially at the younger band level?
There were pieces that inspired me to make music a part of my life. I can't say that they motivated me to compose. I think that came later.
Hmm.
But I remember a pivotal moment back in the 70s. Rather than calling a junior high jazz band a jazz band, they were referred to in a lot of school districts as stage band.
Hmm.
So I was a part of the school stage band, and we played a light rock tune by Sammy Nestico titled Free Spirit. And I just felt that piece aesthetically. I knew at that moment that music had to be a part of my life. There were two other pieces that also inspired me. One was The Thunderer by John Philip Sousa. And a little background, one of our band directors um, was named Oresti Miki, and he grew up in Cicero, Illinois. His parents were Italian immigrants who came to America. And in 1940, he was the solo clarinetist with the United States military band at West Point.
Oh, wow.
And then later on in the 50s, he was conductor of the U.S. Naval School of Music in Washington, D.C. So, needless to say, when he came back to the Chicagoland area and started teaching at the junior high level, he was heavily influenced by Sousa. So he challenged our concert band to learn an authentic Sousa march, and we
Oh,
learned the
wow.
Thunderer. Now, for you middle school directors, I don't recommend this. You could have a bloodbath on your
Yeah.
hands, but it really allowed me to experience one of a piece of music by one of our nation's greatest composers. And one other piece I want to mention, which really grabbed me, and I just revisited it lately, is Rhythm of the Winds by Frank Erickson.
Hmm.
And I think Frank Erickson is a writer whose writing has kind of gone out of vogue, but we really need to go back and revisit Frank's works, his Balladeer, his Air for Band, and my favorite, Rhythm of the Winds. So those were works that inspired me.
And that was an interesting career path that that gentleman you had mentioned, playing trumpet and doing the naval band and then going and teaching at junior high.
Yes.
You would
Now,
think someone like that would either go maybe college or high school at a big program or something, or maybe not end up doing, junior high or something like that.
he was considered one of the finest clarinetists in the country at that time, and he had substituted in with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Believe it or not, the salaries and the stability with family benefits at that time with major orchestras was less than what you could achieve teaching in the public schools.
Hmm.
So, for the sake of his family and to provide for them, he decided on that ultimate career path.
Yeah. Did you have any other composers who influenced you or inspired you, especially as you maybe got into teaching and you were able to, you know, start writing music? You drew from them?
You know, I get a lot of my inspiration from listening.
Hmm.
And for me, I think the most important factor in a piece is what I would refer to as the it factor.
Hmm.
And that is, does the work really grab you? Does it elevate and make your life better because of how the intrinsic elements that are working together represent the patterns and forms of human feeling? And does that connect with you? And in that sense, I have to say one of the greatest influences on me has been the band Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Ah,
Um,
that's cool to hear.
yeah, there's another artist. My favorite musician of all time is a female jazz vocalist, Etta Jones.
Huh.
And I think Etta is the most expressive, soulful musician that I have ever heard.
Hmm.
And she partnered up with a tenor saxophonist named Houston Person. And I would recommend to everyone listen to recordings of Etta Jones and Houston Person.
Hmm.
As you listen to their music, listen to how they communicate with each other, how Houston Person's dialogue steps out of the way of the vocal and puts that up front, and how Etta Jones in return phrases to complement Houston's playing. It's just fantastic musicianship. To get back to your question, when it comes to Western art music, I would say that I've been influenced by Beethoven, Bartok, Stravinsky. I
Hmm.
like how Stravinsky walks right up to the edge, to the precipice of atonalism, but doesn't step over the edge.
Sure.
So I think Stravinsky really challenges our ears, but keeps us within the realm of tonality. Kodai, I
Hmm.
love the Harianos.
Yeah,
Suite.
beautiful work there.
Yes. William Walton, I would say his Crown Imperial is one of my top five favorite compositions of all time. And then, of course, there's Holst and Granger and Sousa and Scott Joplin.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I've got my Scott Joplin doll.
Oh, wow.
I got this at the Scott Joplin house. And in addition to playing trumpet, I also play piano. So
Wow.
I've played a lot of Scott Joplin's rags. And by the way, rag form is exactly the same as standard march form.
That's interesting to hear.
Yeah.
Learn about.
So so if you ever have the chance to compare a Joplin rag to a traditional march, you're going to see the introduction, the first strain, the second strain, the trio section.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. No, thank you for that nugget of information. Yeah, I never knew that. No, go ahead.
Well,
You have something.
in regards to, I want to share a story which is very touching,
Yes.
and if I get a little emotional here, please forgive me. Um, when I first started teaching, I wanted to go into pop music. I wanted to become a songwriter.
Hmm.
So I had plans to go to Nashville or Los Angeles. And during my first 5 years of teaching, I bought a lot of books on songwriting. One of my favorite books is Lyrics by Oscar Hammerstein, who, with Richard Rodgers, has the great musicals. And at at that time, I was writing pop music,
Yes.
saving up my shekels. I was going into a recording studio and I was making live recordings of songs that I had written. And then my mother, who had battled cancer, her health took a turn for the worse.
Oh, wow.
She passed away, and it was necessary for me to stay at home to help my dad through a rough time.
Sure.
At that same time, I was falling in love with teaching, and I realized that my attraction to composing music was not so much a genre, but it was the creative process.
Hmm.
And that was kind of like the aha moment. Why not write band music? And I happen to have a piece in my folder, the band folder at school, titled Big Ben. And it was a march composed by Robert W. Smith, and it was dedicated to his father, who was in the military. The piece had some very cool British sounding references. Um, so you have Big Ben, his dad, and Big Ben, the clock in London, right? Anyway, I looked at that piece and I started to reverse engineer it.
Hmm.
I wanted to see how Mr. Smith used melody, harmony, bass line, how the percussion fit into it, how the piece developed. And from that, I wrote a piece called Spirit of Excellence. Now, that piece was published by Warner Brothers Publications. The copyright has since reverted back to me, and I sell it through my own company, Fanfare Music Press. I call the piece, gotta look and see what I call it. March Triumphant. Anyway, to continue the story, I had a friend in college named Steve who worked with a drum corps in Florida, Suncoast Sound. And Steve connected me with Robert W. Smith, who was the director of Suncoast Sound, which later became Orlando Magic.
Hmm.
And through my friend Steve, I was able to talk to Robert Smith over the phone, and Robert agreed to meet me at Chicago's Midwest Clinic in the mid-1990s. And he treated me to lunch at the Berghoff restaurant. And I told him the story about his piece, Big Ben. And then I showed him my manuscript. I handed him a Sony Walkman. He popped in the cassette tape, listened to the piece, and he felt that it had publication potential. So at that time, the Midwest Clinic was held at the Chicago Hilton. We walked back to the Hilton, and Robert introduced me to his editor, Jack Lamb. And Jack gave me his business card. We made some connections, and that's how I got my first piece published.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, for the emotional serendipitous part. When Robert passed away a few years ago, I heard from his wife, Susan, who asked to meet me for lunch at the Midwest Clinic. And I met with Susan, and she asked if I would help RWS through a period of transition. So in about 10 weeks period of time, I had the chance to edit 21 pieces.
Wow.
And we got that catalog done. And the last piece that I edited was the last piece that Robert wrote. And when Susan approached me and said, Tim, I know of your reputation. I've talked to your editor, Brian Belmages, who says that you're going to do Robert's music right. I trust you. I want you to edit Robert's last piece.
Hmm.
And how could I say no?
Yeah.
That piece of music is titled A Legacy of Hope. It's a very emotive piece. It's a grade 4.5. And I would recommend any advanced high school group or college group or professional group to look at it. And there were many times I had that piece spread out on my desktop at home where I just swelled up with tears and had to stop. But it was a great experience for me, and it was a way to thank Robert and his family for the gift that he'd given me all of those years earlier, meeting me for lunch.
Wow, what a story and what
Yeah.
a connection. One thing that's been fascinating in, attending things like Midwest and our state conference and getting a chance to talk with some of the composers is just, how close knit our music world is. And especially, you're starting out and you hear names like Timothy Loest, Robert W. Smith, your Brian Ballmages. And then you get a chance to connect with them at some level, either like through Zoom like this or at Midwest, and it's just things happen like that. Like, okay, we're gonna go out to you go out to lunch with them, or you strike up a conversation that maybe lasts a half hour, 45 minutes, and we realize how much more we all have in common, and how like just amazing this profession is in a small world it really is, and how really lucky we are to be around great people, even though we're all doing different things as composers, conductors, we're all in this music world together, but we're all so tight knit. It's very interesting. And
Oh, for sure. It's a true blessing. You know,
yeah,
one of my favorite verses in the Bible is every good and perfect gift comes down from the Father of heavenly lights, you know. And it's true, music is a gift that has been given to us. And I think to have the opportunity and the responsibility to treat music with great integrity and to share that wonderful form of communication with the younger generation is there's nothing like it. And then meeting people such as yourself and all of our colleagues in the business we run into who love to do the same thing we do, it's truly a great thing to be a part of.
absolutely. And thank you for sharing that insight in the story. That's fascinating. And to hear especially about Robert W. Smith's, final piece. And
Yeah,
wow. Yeah, that's some amazing stuff. So thank you.
you're welcome.
Um, Switch gears to a little bit of nuts and bolts, if you
Okay.
will. Um, how did you get started writing for beginning and younger bands?
Well, I think the story I shared about the reverse engineering of a Robert piece that got me writing. But I I noticed when I started writing for younger bands. Um, well, let me back up a step. As I taught, there were certain pieces of music that my students played that really connected with them, and I was observing. I think we can learn a lot about how we can change our teaching by observing student behavior. And when a good piece of music is passed out, you see things like the posture changes, the kids sit more upright, there's greater focus. When the bell rings, they're not putting their horns away, they're playing the melody of that piece over. And so I noticed these things with certain pieces of music. So in that way, I think teaching had influenced my composing and writing for younger bands. And I wanted to tap into it. I found that an attractive proposition to see if I could create musical works that would also resonate with kids the way my students had responded when they had played great pieces of music. So I think that was kind of the motivator there.
What was like when you were teaching, what was a balance of how much music you would write for your bands and that your bands would play by you versus, other composers and other things, you would play?
Well, I wanted to be very careful
Sure.
not to overstay my welcome as far as my composing goes. You know, I think it's important. I was hired first and foremost to be the band director
Mm.
for I taught in Itasca, Illinois for Itasca School District 10, which is a small suburban school, and it's a wonderful district. I was so blessed to be a part of that community, and I always made it a point to separate the composer from the teacher um, when it came to doing giving to Caesar that which is Caesar and giving to music that which is music's, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
At the same time, when you have an interest in writing and you have a laboratory in your own classroom, I think there's nothing wrong with distributing a piece every once in a while, which is what I would do.
Hmm.
And I would share that information with my administration. And the publishing companies that I wrote for, primarily FJH for most of my career, my editor, Mr. Balmages, would allow me to use PDFs of works before they went into production
Hmm.
so that we could play test them and then our students could benefit by getting a free piece of music in our library.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is the greatest challenge you find in writing for beginning and younger developing bands?
You know, I think the greatest challenge for writing for younger bands is the same challenge that would be for writing for any age group. Earlier, I had mentioned the it factor, creating works of music that really grab you and make a connection with you personally. And along with the it factor, there are what I'm going to refer to as layers of significance. And these layers of significance go beyond genre, they go beyond time signature and key signature. And they include advanced concepts, advanced rhythmic, melodic, and harmonic concepts. Things like repetition, augmentation, diminution, syncopation. You have suspension, melodic sequence, false cadences, Landini underthirds. There's canon, there's retrograde, there's inversion, there's aleatoric devices. You also have sound effects. And you could even put cacophony into a piece. So those layers of significance, seeing that they can be incorporated into music, takes extra work and effort and time. And not all writers are willing to pay their dues on the front end to end up with a quality piece of music on the back end. And I think if you look at those writers whose careers have been able to last for decades, you're going to see writers who use those layers of significance.
How do you get out of having pieces sound the same, especially maybe a grade half or to a grade 1.5? Which is something I'm not just saying this. I think you do so well where your pieces they all don't sound the same or have the same kind of framework, if you will. Which I think is great. You have such a variety in your catalog, which is that's why we play them, and they sound great and they work well as well. But how do you get
So,
out of that rut?
so I think I'll answer this strictly from my perspective, and that is, for me, if I start to focus on volume over quality, that would lead me down a path that's not in alignment with my musical values. So I've been writing, my first published work came out in 1995, and I have about 120 pieces in print. Now, for me, that's a substantial amount, but if you look over 30 years, 120 pieces, that's 4 pieces per year.
Hmm.
And there are writers who are writing a lot more than that. Some can because they're gifted that way. Others can because they overproduce and they're not being mindful about the quality of the music that they're writing. I constantly keep a close view on the genres that I've written, the types of pieces that I've written, and I am careful not to duplicate myself.
Hmm.
I also have a very tough editor, Brian Belmages. Now, Brian wants all of his writers to produce their best works, not only for the sake of the students and the music and for the profitability of the company, but also for the benefit of the writer. So when you have that set of eyes and ears looking over your catalog along with you, making sure that you don't reprocess the same piece over multiple times in slightly different fashions, that's of benefit.
Hmm. I think we know a little bit of this answer already, but did you teach at this level, before you began writing music for, younger bands? And then what grade level did you teach during your career? And was it the same all the way through? I know you're at the same school.
Yeah, so I my first year of teaching was an interesting year. I taught at a variety of schools up in Lake County, Illinois, and I worked for a music company that provided schools to provided music programs to parochial schools primarily.
Mm.
My second year of teaching, I became a part of the Itasca School District 10 family. I was hired there in 1986, and I taught all the way through 2022. And at that time, we were starting kids in fourth grade.
Oh, wow.
After 6 years of teaching, I took a 1 year leave of absence and got my Master of Music Education degree at Northwestern University. While I was at Northwestern, I had the wonderful privilege of studying under Bennett Reamer, who is considered to be one of the leading voices of philosophy of music education in the world. Um, the Northwestern program allowed for each student to find a primary area of focus, so I chose composition. So when I returned to teaching after that year leave of absence, I had more composing tools in my toolbox. I had a refined philosophy of music, and all of that helped me to be a better composer later on. And one of my projects at Northwestern was the composition Spirit of Excellence, the one that I showed to Robert Smith. And it took 3 years to rewrite that thing correctly to get it published, but I stuck with it. So I kind of feel like I might be drifting away from your question here. If you need to rein me in, go for it.
No, this is great. No, no. So when you taught, the most of your career, what grade levels did you end up doing?
Thank you for reining me in. Um, when I was getting my master's, I did research on the best time to start beginners, and it seemed that fifth grade would be a better time than fourth grade. So I proposed research to our school board, and we shifted from a fourth grade start to a fifth grade start. With that, we had greater retention, and the program grew. In a period of 3 years, we went from 105 students to 165. And then we were approaching the 200 mark. Now, the middle school where I taught had typically about 325 students, and I had a third of those kids in band. So we had good representation. So I started teaching out 4 through 8 and then 5 through 8.
Hmm.
And then due to program growth, we hired a fifth grade band director
Oh, wow.
who worked in our district part-time. And then I had the sixth, seventh, and eighth grade program. So half of my career was exclusively middle school, and the first half was the whole enchilada.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, do you write a piece of music with specific learning outcomes in mind? Especially, when you were teaching, my kids are going to struggle with syncopation. Let me write this, a piece or something. Or do you always revert back to specific concepts that you have from teaching in your writing?
You know, I don't know that I intentionally will focus in on one concept for the sake of teaching that. Um, there's a misunderstanding in the world of music that somehow educational music is subpar to classic music, right? And I don't think it has to be that way. I think that if we strive as composers to write artistically, and that would be, and I'm going to use Reamer's 4 criteria to make sure that our works have craftsmanship, imagination, sensitivity, and then authenticity.
Hmm.
If those 4 criteria are kept inside a composition, then all of those learning teaching concepts are going to be present because we need the elements of music to compose, and it's those interacting elements of music that we are teaching every day in the classroom that we're helping our students understand. And through those interactions, that's where that aesthetic response comes.
Hmm. I like
So
that.
I hope that wasn't too academic, but you know,
Oh, that's fantastic. How do you balance the need to be creative with your scoring and your writing, along with the need to keep younger players active and engaged, especially where there may be larger like percussion sections and all of those things, but keeping true to what you would like to have a piece of music sound like?
I would say refinement.
Mm.
That word refinement. Um, and I am obsessive about self-editing. Before my editor sees my music, I mentioned I write, by the way, I want to give due to a number of people here. If I could just throw in a quick
Oh,
message.
absolutely.
I wrote for over 22, 23 years for the FJH Music Company. And I'm eternally grateful to Frank Hackinson and the Hackinson family for that opportunity. When my editor, Brian Balmages, shifted over to Alfred, he's now my editor for Make Music Publications. So I write for Make Music Publications. And then through the story I told earlier, meeting with Susan Smith, I am now submitting some works to RWS.
Oh, okay.
And you mentioned how small of a world it is. I believe Frank Hackinson was one of the music publishers who discovered Robert W. Smith when he was a young man.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So now getting back to that question or the statement of refinement, if one thinks about how a home is built, you pour your concrete foundation, then you have your 2x4 studs, and then you have your exterior building material, which might be brick, it might be plywood. Then you have your insulation and then your drywall. Um, Sometimes composers who write quickly stop at the drywall.
Mm.
And that's not finishing the job. You need to prime the tape and mud the drywall. You need to sand it. You need to prime it. You need to paint it. And then once that's done, there's the trim work, and then there's the electrical wall plates, and then there's the paintings that you hang up in the house and family portraits. And that's how I balance um, my pieces out to keep all sections active. I constantly go back and refine. So for instance, I can refine a piece harmonically, and I can say, okay, I've got pretty standard chord progressions in this section. Can I substitute
Mm.
any altered chords anywhere within that section to make the piece more interesting? And if I can, I will do it. I will look at percussion and say, what other sounds can I use? Are there any holes or gaps that we can fill in appropriately with interesting percussion sounds? When it comes to melody, are there spots in the melody where we can add eighth note passing tones to make the melody more interesting? And if I write something, say, in a chordal chorale block style, I will revisit that and say, can this be written as a fugue? Can I take the soprano, alto, tenor, and bass voices and layer them? Or perhaps could this be written antiphonally? And you see, when you do things like that, you're now giving greater opportunity to your bass voices,
Mm.
more independence to the different families of instruments. And you're taking a pretty solid, safe piece and expanding it in detail.
Hmm.
So I say refinement is probably the number one tool that I use to bring about more artistry within a work.
Final two questions. Something that I'm really passionate about is commissioning works for band. And if you could expand upon that and maybe make people realize, how pretty much easy the process is to go about commissioning a piece of music for your band or organization with a composer.
It's easy. You just have to ask, right? The worst thing that can happen is the composer is booked or something comes up in their life and they have to say no. You can reach out to any composer through their website, or you can write to their publisher, and the message will make it to the composer. Now, I do have some thoughts on the commissioning process and recommendations. It's my opinion that the most important aspect before you commission a work is to determine which composer you want to write for you. And you'll know that answer by looking at how your students respond to the works of a particular composer. And if you have one composer in mind, go to that composer exclusively and don't reach out to other composers. Talk directly with that composer. You can reach the composer through their website or through their publisher. And then once you've done that, you can discuss the nature of the project. Is the work created explicitly just for bringing about a new piece of music and involving the students in the process? Or is it a dedication? Is the school opening up a new building, a new wing? Is there someone who's retiring who the school wants to honor? There's different reasons for commissions. So once you have that composer in mind, reach out to them, and then they'll discuss their timeline as well as what their fee schedule is. What I would recommend you do not do is form a committee
Mm.
and assign each member of the committee to reach out to a composer. And this happens to me once or twice a year. I'll get a correspondence. It'll be very generic, and it'll say, my name is such and such. I'm the band director at such and such school. I'm a part of this group. I'm reaching out to you to find out how much you charge for a grade 2 piece. And when I see something like that, I find it very discouraging, because when I write for schools, I really put my heart and soul and a lot of time and effort into it. And I want that to be the top priority, quality music. And right when the price is the first question, that kind of discourages me, because it seems like that with those types of requests, there's no real interest in creating a great product. So
It's a great perspective.
well, I hope I didn't step on any toes out there
Not
in
at
video
all. Final question for you. I think you've touched on this a little bit, but if you could go in a little bit more detail, are you mostly self-published, commercially published, and how have you cultivated success in getting your young band music out there? And what do where can we find your music at today?
Well, thanks. I'm primarily commercially published, and I have nothing against self-publishing. In fact, in 2022, I opened up my own publishing company. It's a very small
Hmm.
company called Fanfare Music Press. I think we have 5 pieces in the catalog. I came up with grade quarter music, 4 or fewer notes in concert B flat. And it's to make the jump from the first exercises in a lesson book to real pieces of band music. So that aside, most of my works are commercially published. And right now I'm writing for Make Music Publications, a division of Alfred. Next year I'm going to have 2 pieces come out with Bellwin. Now
Oh,
at Make Music, my editor is Brian Balmages, and at Bellwin it's Chris Bernatas. And both Brian and Chris are great editors. They're demanding, their artistic insight into guiding composers to get the best out of their work is just uncanny. I'm also writing for RWS, and my editors there are Mark Lortz and Kim Benson. And what I have found for myself is that when I'm commercially published, I think it brings about my best work.
Hmm.
And the reason is, the fact is, when someone is looking over your shoulder, you tend to behave better. And I think that's the case if an administrator walks into the band room, right? We want to make sure that we're on our game. And I think that holds true for commercially published music as well. So you can find my music through Alfred's website, through RWS's website, through FJH's website. The different companies like Stanton's and J.W. Pepper and Long and McQuaid up in Canada, and whoever sells music, Penders. I'm going to leave some out. I'm sorry, dealers, but that's how you can find it.
Great. Any final comments? And lastly, where can we find you on social media, website, those sorts of things to check you out?
Well, I have a website, timothyloest.com, and it needs a rebuild. But if you visit it, you'll get the gist of what my music is all about. So you can find me there. I do have a Facebook page, Timothy Loest dash composer conductor, or conductor composer. It's one of the two. You'll find it. I'm not a big social media guy, probably to my own sales detriment, but that's where you can find me.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time for this interview. It's been fascinating and great talking with you.
If I could leave everybody with one thought.
Yes.
Throughout my career as a teacher and writer, I've wanted to come up with one statement that could keep me focused on what's most important. And I came across the words of Mother Teresa. And she said, "Let no one ever leave you without being better or happier." And the last third of my teaching career, I had those words on my office door. So whenever I came into the band room and saw it, no matter how I was feeling, if it was a rough day at home or whatever, I was reminded that my job was to leave people around me better and happier. And I think if we do that as music teachers, if we leave our students better musicians and happier people, we have succeeded. And the same goes for composing or anything in life. So those are the words of my favorite band director, Saint Mother Teresa. And I appreciate the interview opportunity. My commission schedule is looking pretty free right now, which doesn't happen. I've been slammed the last 5 years. So if you're thinking about a commission out there, reach out to me and we'll talk.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot.